You think that I think I'm right? It's not a trick question. Everybody's looking at me like, I'm not going there. This guy's too slippery. Do you think I think I'm right? Of course I think I'm right. If I didn't think I'm right, I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't even believe it. Of course I think my beliefs are true. If I didn't think my beliefs were true, I wouldn't believe what I believe. I would believe something else and think that was true. Just like everyone else. That is, I'm not the only person in the conversation who thinks he's right, am I? Because the other guy giving me a hard time thinks he's right too. In fact, I ask him that. Because he says, well, you think you're right, so well, do you think you're right? Now, what is he going to say? No, I have all these beliefs, I think they're dead wrong. Well, he might say, well, I think I'm right for me. Well, why are you talking to me right now if you're just right for you? What I would like you to see, and I don't care whether you're a Christian or not here, what I want you to see is that this little you're intolerant business, in that situation, both sides think they're right. But only one side is getting beat up for it. So I have a follow-up question. Remember, he says, you're intolerant. I say, what do you mean by that? He says, well, you think you're right. I say, well, I do think I'm right. Maybe I'm not. We can talk about it. But do you think you're right? Yeah, I'm right. I think I'm right. You're wrong. That's why I'm saying. Okay, final question. Why is it when I think I'm right, I'm intolerant? But when you think you're right, you're just right. What am I missing here? Now, of course, I'm not missing anything, and I don't want you to miss it either. This way of challenging anybody, Christian or Muslim or anyone who thinks they're right, is just illegitimate. It's thoughtless. It doesn't take you anywhere. It does no good whatsoever because everybody in the conversation thinks they're right. It would be better for us to quit calling each other names, intolerant, narrow-minded, arrogant, and just get on with trying to figure out who's right, for goodness sake, because this issue matters. So it doesn't help just to dismiss the claim by saying you're intolerant. This doesn't get you anywhere, and if you think it does, you're fooling yourself. Second thing I just mentioned, another thing that gets in the way, well, Christians, you're just narrow-minded. Now, the person who says this generally is mistaken. But it's because he doesn't understand what narrow-mindedness is. So I'm going to make a distinction here. There is a difference between having a narrow view and being narrow-minded. So the doctor says, you've got diabetes, you need insulin. Can I have anything else? No, insulin. Why not? Because it's the only thing that works. Well, you're narrow-minded. No, I'm not narrow-minded. I'm narrow. There's only one solution. Narrow-mindedness is something different. Solutions are almost always narrow. Narrow-mindedness is not having to do with the solution or suggested solution, but has to do with the way of thinking of an individual. Is the person willing to engage the ideas and to consider what might be true or might be false, even if it's different than his own view? If not, they're what? Narrow-minded. They like have blinders on. I won't consider any other alternative. Look, at my view is narrow because I hold the view that Jesus held. But are we narrow-minded, either of us? Well, I, for one, am willing to talk with anybody about all the options to see if any options are good. I've just been convinced they're not any good by comparison. Therefore, I'm not narrow-minded, though I have a narrow view. Ironically, the person who charges the Christian with narrow-mindedness is more often, in my experience, and I'm not putting people down here, I'm just making an observation, is more often the person that's looking just like this. They have their idea, and they don't want to hear anything else. And when anything else comes in from the periphery, they get rid of it by calling it what? Narrow-minded. So they don't have to consider it. So I'm just making a suggestion here. When it comes to this very important question, the central claim of Jesus, who he was and what he did, and how it applies to us, there's two strategies for getting rid of this idea so you don't have to think seriously about it. One, you can call the person who says Jesus is the only way, you can call them narrow-minded. Another one is you can call them intolerant. And if you're satisfied with that, well, you're satisfied with too little. So don't fool yourself, because neither of those responses address the issue, whether or not Jesus is the only way. So let's get those out of the way from the outset. The next thing that I'd like to say is I do not think it is reasonable to believe that all religions are equally valid routes to God. I think that this is false on the merits, that is, because of the nature of the claim itself, regardless of my own convictions as a Christian. In fact, I was actually, about this view that all religions lead to God has a name, and it's called pluralism. Lots of religions, they're all fine, they all lead to God, and if you don't think so, something's wrong with you. That's kind of the general idea in culture today. So I got asked to be on this TV show about 10 years ago. It's called Test of Faith. And in this show, they would fly out some religious weirdo, and they'd put him in the hot seat, and it was a semicircular table, and the hot seat was in the inside of the circle, and there's 4 chairs on the outside. Then they'd bring in these people to beat up the poor religious weirdo for an hour on national TV. By the way, where do you think Mr. Koukl was sitting? I was the weirdo in the hot seat. Now, what was my weird religious idea? My weird idea was that I did not believe that all, religiously speaking, spiritually speaking, all roads led to Rome, all paths led to the top of the mountain. I didn't think that all religions were equally true. So I rejected pluralism. Everybody else on the panel, a Sikh, this is the gentleman, religious order who wears the turbans. There was a Hindu pastor. There was a female pastor of a liberal Christian church, the United Church of Canada. Pluralists all on this panel. Okay. Now, I want to tell you the argument that I offered on that show, because I think it is a fair argument. I was going to argue against pluralism, that is, against the idea that all religions are equally true. I was going to argue for it in a way that did not trade on my own spiritual convictions. I told Valerie Pringle, the host of the show, I said, Valerie, anybody can use this argument. A Jew, a Muslim, a Christian, look, an atheist could even use it if they're at least open to the possibility of some religion being true. Frankly, even if they're not, they can demonstrate that the claim that all religions are true is a false claim. Oh, an interesting part, by the way, of the sideline is before the show started, I was having a conversation with one of the crew members, you know, and this wasn't a Christian show, it was a secular thing, and this guy was an atheist. His name was Pierre. But we were getting on fine, chitter-chattering back and forth. I'd actually talked to him on the phone a couple of weeks earlier to set this whole thing up, and I said, Pierre, yeah, well, maybe you're not a betting man. Let's have a gentleman's wager. I'm just going to have a little bet with you about how this is going to go here. I don't know, maybe it won't turn out this way, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to argue, I'm going to offer an argument against pluralism, and the people on the panel are going to ignore my argument, and then they are going to attack me personally for being a Christian. I don't know, we'll see. So I start out, cameras are rolling, first 5-minute segment, Valerie Pringle and me, she wants to know why I'm not a pluralist, and so I offer my argument, and so here's the argument. I said, Valerie, Jesus claimed to be the Messiah. Well, he either was the Messiah or he wasn't the Messiah, right? No other options. Now, if he wasn't the Messiah, well, then the Jews are right. The Christians are wrong. If he was the Messiah, then the Christians are right and the Jews are wrong, but under no circumstance can they both be right, can they? Pretty straightforward. I said, if God exists, maybe it's an open question, but if he does, he's either a personal God or he's not personal. He's some kind of force. Now, if it turns out that God is not personal, the Hindus are right on that one, and the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims are wrong. If it turns out that God is personal, then the Jews and Christians and Muslims are right on that issue, and the Hindus are wrong, but under no circumstance can they both be right. When you die, you either go to heaven or hell, or maybe you get reincarnated, or maybe you lie in the grave, but you can't do them all at the same time. Somebody's making a mistake here. Notice I'm not talking about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin either. I'm talking about things that really matter, that are substantive distinctions. What's God like? Does he exist? What about Jesus? I mean, Jesus is central to Christianity. Rejection of it is central to Judaism. Now, there's only two ways around this argument, or at least two attempts to get around this argument, and both of them fail. In fact, I mentioned that on the TV show. I said, I don't think any of our panelists are going to take it, but they're not going to get very far because their weakness is even in the two attempts. But anyway, in any event, that's my argument, and it traded on the very sensible, rational notion that two claims that are diametrically opposed to each other can't both be true at the same time. This is simple. So, commercial break. By the way, that's a good argument. You can take it to the bank. I've taken that argument all over the country, universities everywhere. There's no answer to it because it's sound. Commercial break. Then the Sikh comes up. He was a real nice guy in the green room. Now the cameras are rolling, right? So everything's changed. Well, he starts out kind of mild. Valerie Pringle says, well, what do you think of Mr. Koukl's argument? He said, well, I think, if Mr. Koukl thinks he won the lottery, good for him. Won the lottery? What is he talking about? Is he talking about my argument against pluralism? No. He knows I'm a Christian. He went to the internet and checked it out. He downloaded things from our internet, and he had papers there that he'd printed out. And he knows that I follow Jesus and think Jesus is the only way. And so his opening remark is, well, if you're the lucky one who got the lucky number with Jesus, good for you. This guy's an attorney in Toronto, and this is how he starts his meaningful discussion with me? And then he didn't stay passive very long, that passive-aggressive opening. He's shaking the paper in my face, and Valerie has to push him down in his seat, like more than once, because he's so mad at me. And then the other two, the Hindu pastor come up in the United Church of Christ, United something, I can't remember, but it was like a Christian. And they're all after me. And pretty soon, certain words start seeping into their conversation. Words like, what? Intolerant and narrow-minded and arrogant. Now, when they say these things to me, are they addressing my argument? No. They're fulfilling my prophecy. At some point, I stopped and I said, you know what, you guys are... It's interesting the way our conversation has gone. We started out talking about an idea, pluralism, and somehow we got off on a discussion about Mr. Koukl's personality. Mr. Koukl's arrogant, Mr. Koukl's narrow-minded, Mr. Koukl's... Well, look, Mr. Koukl's mean, I guess is what you're saying to me. All right, I can live with that. Why don't I just admit that I'm mean? So I'll agree with all of you that I'm a big meanie, okay? And then can we get on with our discussion? In fact, I pointed out to them, I know you're objecting because I'm a Christian, and this bothers you, and you think Christianity's wrong. Well, that may be true, but if Christianity's wrong, then it's not a legitimate way to God. And therefore, if you're right in your attack on me that Christianity is wrong, then you're wrong about what we're supposed to be talking about today. Pluralism. Now, you guys didn't get that joke. It wasn't a joke. It really happened. They're attacking me that Christianity is wrong. Well, if it's wrong, then pluralism is false. They're proving my point by their attack on me. I bring these stories up to show you the foolishness that people use to try to get around addressing the obvious fact that all religions can't be true. So now let me change my focus right now. What I'd like to do is talk about Jesus now. Since they can't all be true, well, let's talk about whether Jesus got it right, or whether we have good reason to think that. And here I want to appeal to the historical record with regards to Jesus. And some of you are saying, wow, what history? Did you find other history? Yeah, I found lots of history on him. There are actually 17 ancient historical documents that are secular sources that talk about Jesus. But I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that history. That's good history. That's useful history, but it's itty-bitty in terms of what it says. I'm talking about 4 other documents that we get from history that are what the historians use to figure out what Jesus was like and what he said and what he did. And we know them as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Oh, that's the Bible. Well, yeah, it is the Bible, what Christians call the Bible, but historians call it the primary source historical documents for the life of Jesus. These are ancient biographies that come to us individually. There's some overlap in them, but they're separate recordings of the life of Jesus. And these things get very, very high marks on the history scale from secular historians who know what they're doing. And when we look at these details about the life of Christ, and by the way, I'm not at this point either arguing or assuming that the Bible is God's Word. We will talk about that tomorrow morning. This is not what I'm saying tonight. I am simply appealing to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the primary source historical documents, as historical documents. They recorded what Jesus said and did. When you look at those records, you discover something interesting about Jesus. He did not come, as it turns out, to teach about peace and love and getting along with each other. He did not come to teach us to take care of the poor. That is not what he said he came for. He said, I came to seek and to save that which was lost. I came not to seek the righteous, but sinners and call them to repentance. I came to give my life as a ransom for many. A ransom is where you pay money to get something back that's in slavery. Jesus said, I came to be the payment to purchase something out of slavery. Those were his words. And in fact, the identity of Jesus was the central issue of his ministry. Now, a lot of folks will say otherwise. And when they say otherwise to me, I ask them a question. Have you read Jesus? Or have you just browsed the internet? If you read Jesus, don't listen to me. Go back to the accounts. Let Jesus speak for himself. When you read Jesus, you see Jesus has a very different take than what a lot of people characterize him as having. He was incredibly intolerant by today's standards. He was a remarkable man, showed incredible amounts of love, but also by today's standards, he had a lot of stuff that would really spook people out. And when Jesus, in a certain sense, was cornered regarding the most important thing, he always came back with the same thing. His life was about himself and what he came to do. It is the person and the work of